good evening again, YouTube. This is my new mixer, something I acquired last week for band use, primarily live use with the band. Grounds for Divorce, check us out on Facebook, etc. Lots of videos of us doing live gigs on my YouTube channel as well if you're interested. Primarily for live use, but also for a bit of recording as well, probably do some demos on it. I was going to do a review, but as I only got it last week and it's not been really properly used yet, it didn't seem much point in doing a review as such. But instead I thought what I'd like to do is to talk about mixers generally, not particularly this one, just using this one to illustrate some of the points I want to make. And the reason for the video is to talk about mixing desks at a very, very basic level. For me, up until about 18 months ago, mixers and mixing desks and all that was a bit of a dark art, and I knew nothing about any of that side of the music production or the live music. Left it to somebody else, and I gradually found myself getting more and more involved in operating desks, rehearsal times and gigs, and also happened to find that I really enjoyed it. So it really interested me, so I read up a lot over the last 18 months or so on mixing and what it all involved, and I want to share a bit of the knowledge that I've accrued with you if you're just getting into it like I was about 18 months ago. So I'm not a professional sound guy, I'm just a bloke in a band with a day job who happens to be interested in this sort of thing and happens to have operated a desk on a few occasions. So it's a very basic level, all in layman's terms, not very technical at all. I won't get into all of that side of it. So if you're looking for professional sound advice and all that malarkey, go elsewhere, you're not going to get it here. This is real bum basic stuff for noobs, which is exactly what I am. So the video is going to get a bit wobbly. I may have to split it up into a couple of parts because it's going to be fairly lengthy, I would think. It's hard really to do this briefly and cover it all adequately. So and I've already been told on a lot of my reviews that I talk too much, so that's my style. I'm not going to apologise for it. I do go on a bit. If you don't like that, switch it off. So here we go. The video, I'm doing this on my own as well, so the video probably get a bit wobbly as well in stages. Apologies for that in advance. Not very professional, but there you go. Right, so this is a 12-channel analog mixing desk, and it's unpowered. There are essentially two types of analog desk. There's a powered one and an unpowered one, and the difference is that the powered one has the amplifier to drive the speakers built into the desk, so it's all one unit. With an unpowered desk such as this, you have two options to get your sound out to the speakers. One is have a separate amp, and the other one is and increasingly more popular nowadays with better technology and more lighter, compact built-in amplifiers to speakers, is the powered speaker route, which is the route I'm going to go down once I get a bit more cash together and buy some powered speakers, or often known as active speakers, which is essentially where the amplifier part of the circuit is built into the speaker enclosure, so it's all one unit. Disadvantage, I guess, is that they need mains power. Each speaker needs a separate plug, mains power to plug them in. The advantages, as far as I'm concerned, are that they're almost as light and small and compact now as passive speakers, and it's one less bit of extra gear you need to carry around with you, i.e. you don't need a separate amp to drive them. I've got an unpowered desk because if the amplifier craps out on a powered desk, you're left with a very large, heavy mixer, which can still be used as a mixer, whereas if I've got an unpowered desk and any element of all the components failed, either the amp, the speakers, whatever, it's just that bit that you replace in the desk is just my philosophy anyway, my thoughts on the matter. I'm sure there's lots of different views on which is best, but for us, an unpowered desk with active powered speakers is the way we're going to go. We're also going to be using active monitors, fold back speakers so we can hear what we're doing on stage, All of that is in the pipeline, and probably an active sub as well at some stage to assist with the bass frequencies and give the bass a bit of a boost. So I'm going to talk about, probably start this with the inputs section and the channel strips and explain what all that does, and then probably do a part 2 which talks about the outputs and the masters section, and possibly the EQ and the effects part, because this mixer has built-in effects as well. Again, you can get them with or without. For me, the advantage was it was all on board. Most of the effects I'm going to want are reverb for vocals, so not having to carry around a separate effects unit was again a bit of a bonus for me. So it's got built-in effects, 32-bit digital effects, so fairly good actually, fairly good sound off them, very pleased. I'm going to move the camera now and take you through a typical channel of inputs and controls, and as I said, it's very basic level, but for those who don't know about mixers or don't know much about them, it can often be very bewildering, all these knobs and switches and sliders and everything else, and it's very straightforward when you understand that each one of these channels is identical to the next. And once you learn one channel strip, which is one vertical piece here on the mixer, you know the whole thing, you know they're all identical. Slight exception to that is when you get over here to the stereo channels, which is slightly different, very, very similar to the mono channels, slightly different, and actually the main difference with them is slightly less functionality, slightly less controls on them, but I'll cover those a bit later on. So first of all, I'll take you through a typical mono strip, and this is replicated on a lot of different mixers. All have more features or less features or the same features as this. They do vary a little bit, but the basics are very common across all brands and on all types of analog mixers, be they powered or unpowered. I should have said at the beginning, you could also go down the digital route if cost is no option. If cost is no object, I should say, but that doesn't apply to us. So the analog route is the one we went down. So I'm going to move the camera now over to the desk so you can actually see closer some of the controls. Right. Okay, let's look at this then. So this is a Mackie CFX 12 Mark II. 12 channel, comes in a CFX 16 channel or a 20. So this is the smallest one that they do. Comes with 8 mono inputs here, and when they quote the 12 channels, what they also mean is there are 2 stereo channels. That's 9, 10 left and right, 11, 12 left and right. That's actually one channel with 2 inputs. So there's 8 mono channels here, capable of taking a balanced XLR microphone would typically be the input on those channels. Can be used obviously for vocals and also for DIing and electric instruments such as electric guitar, bass, or acoustic guitar into those. So your amplifier or preamp for the instrument that you're using would either have a DI out, which you can plug an XLR cable directly from the amp, then in that case into one of these, or you can go through a DI box, which are fairly inexpensive now, about 30 quid for an active DI box. Plug your instrument level, your cable from your guitar into the DI box, and then an XLR balanced output from the DI box into here. What the DI box does is bring the instrument level signal up to balanced microphone level signal, and matches the impedance. And don't ask me to explain all this, I'm getting far beyond the scope of this, but it essentially matches the it presents the signal to the channel in a way that the desk can understand and cope with very easily. It's all to do with impedance, but I would say I won't get into that. You can, not advisable, but you can plug a guitar directly into the line-in socket here. I'll talk about that in a moment as well, but not advisable because the signal, the instrument level signal from the guitar will not match what the desk is expecting to find here at this input, and therefore the impedance will be mismatched and you won't get optimum sound through the desk. So that's not advisable, plugging guitars and stuff directly into these. I don't think it damages them as far as I can make out, but it's not ideal, let's put it that way. So if you're going to plug a guitar, a bass, an acoustic or something directly into the desk, then DI really is the way to go, unless of course you're going to mic the amp or the cabinet you're playing on stage with you know, a Marshall 100 watt amp or 50 watt amp, whatever it is. Stick a microphone in front of the cabinet and run the mic into here, and a lot of the purists, the tone purists, would say that that really is the way to capture the sound, the tone of the cabinet and the amp that you're using, is to mic the cabinet and run it into the desk. What we intend to do in our band is to have vocals into these directly. That's easy enough. 2 microphones, as myself and Adele, who sing in the band. We DI the bass, which is what a lot of sound engineers prefer, and I have a Marshall bass stack with a DI out that will feed directly into this, and I essentially then use the bass stack as an on-stage monitor, and the sound for bigger venues goes straight through the desk. And then our 2 guitarists, Stephen and Doc, would be looking to mic their cabinets, their amps that they use on stage, again for on-stage monitors. They'll use them for that, and they'll mic the cab back to the desk to give PA support, so it lifts the sound to the front of house speakers. And finally, Roy, the drummer, probably for a bit of PA support with the kick drum particularly, will mic the kick drum, probably mic the snare, and if we need to get into micing the drum kit any more than that, we're probably going to be playing at a venue that's big enough they've got their own in-house PA, so we should have plenty of inputs here on the desk, and that's why I chose this particular desk, because it had 8 mono inputs. So if I take you down one of the channel strips and explain what all this is all about, and as I said at the beginning, each of these are identical, just one vertical strip the whole way down the desk, and once you've learnt one, you know them all. So that's basically, once you've learnt one, you've learnt that entire section of this desk. I know you've got to worry about then of these little bits here, which is I suppose the easy part really. So if we look at one of the channel strips, we'll take channel number 6. So starting at the top on this desk, and on some desks you have the inputs at the back panel here, and some you have them on the top. This particular desk, as you can see, has them on the top. So you start, normally this is quite a common configuration of controls. You have a balanced XLR input, as I've said already, for a microphone, be it voice, a guitar cab, whatever you're micing, drum kit, whatever you're micing into there, or a DI from an amp or a preamp straight into there. Or you can go in here on the line in and put an unbalanced 1/4" jack, 1/4" jack being the same size as your standard guitar cable jack. You may come into there, that's at line level, so not instrument level. So as I said at the beginning, I'd really advise you strongly not to plug a guitar directly into a desk. That's for line level, like, I don't know, drum machine, keyboard, something like that, although for that you're probably going to end up using the stereo inputs here. I'll talk about those in a moment. Then below that, on this particular desk, you have an insert point for every mono channel. What that does is allow you to tap the signal coming down this channel, send it out somewhere, and return it back again into the channel strip. And while it's away from the desk, it can be processed by way of compressor, EQ, something of that nature. So it essentially allows you a direct tap into the signal coming through that channel strip to send it out to outboard signal processors such as EQs and compressors, and then return it to the desk. What you would normally get in there is a 1/4" jack wired in TRS configuration, so that's tip, ring and sleeve. With the tip, I think, sends the signal, the ring returns the signal, and the sleeve is the common ground. So you have a 1/4" jack going in there with a Y connector into your send and return, 2 jacks then into your processor, and the one jack both sends the signal and receives it back into the desk, and they're quite common. They're easy to get hold of, those Y insert adapters. So that's what you use that bit for there, for a signal processor. Moving down then into the actual controls for the channel. Again, most desks have this layout. You're starting at the very top with the gain control, sometimes called trim on some desks, but it's gain on this particular desk. And what that does is it allows you to adjust the signal coming into the channel strip from your device, be it a microphone or guitar or whatever it is. It allows you to adjust the level of that signal to an optimum level for the desk to understand and work with. Just to say, obviously not all microphones are the same. Some are more sensitive than others, some have different dynamic characteristics. What this allows you to do, the gain control, is to equalise, if you like, all the inputs to a common level that the desk can then work with the other controls. So for a microphone level signal, I use a Shure SM58, quite a common vocal mic. You'd need a fair bit of gain around to maybe the 2 or 3 o'clock position, maybe 2 o'clock position, to get a signal up to suitable strength for the desk to work with effectively. So any lower than that, and you're going to be getting noise, electrical noise from the desk, hiss, whatever it might be. Any higher than that, and you're going to be clipping and overloading the channel, leading to distortion and undesirable sound characteristics. So what you're trying to do with this gain control is set the optimum level for the source to bring everything up to the same sort of quality and optimize the signal to noise ratio, essentially, is what you're trying to do here. Now this desk has a very handy yellow LED just next to the gain control that gives you a very quick and dirty guide to whether you're about right or not with the gain. So on this particular desk, if you make your noise into the sound source, into the device, so like you shout in the microphone or sing at your normal volume, should I say, and adjust the gain control on this desk until that yellow light just flickers on and off now and again when the channel peaks. If it's a constant yellow, the gain's too high and you're going to get that clipping and overload on the channel. If the light isn't lighting at all, your level is too low and you're not getting the maximum benefit out of the mic and the gain control. So that yellow LED gives you a very quick and dirty reference as to how you're doing with your gain and whether it's about right or not. You can then go on to set that more accurately using the meters on the desk over here, but I'm not going to talk about that just yet. I'll talk about that when we get to the masters and the output section. So that's the gain control. The first control on most desks is there, adjusting the sensitivity of the input signal to optimum level for the desk to work with. Okay. On this desk, again, quite common, on all the microphone channels, it has this little button here, which is a low cut filter. It's often called high pass, it's the same thing. What that does is eliminate all frequencies coming into the channel below 100 Hertz on this particular desk. So again, in plain English, in layman's terms, what that does is cuts out all of those horrible bass frequencies that, unless you're playing a bass instrument, bass guitar, bass drum, synthesized with bass sounds, whatever it might be, then you don't really want those creeping into the mix on the vocals and that kind of thing. It also eliminates a lot of the rumble from rough handling of microphones, some of the vibration coming up through the mic stands from the stage, a lot of the pop and the hiss, the breathy stuff from poor microphone technique. So that low cut filter, it's advisable, well Mackie certainly advise anyway, that you engage that filter on all channels where a microphone's being used for vocals. That low cut filter, just click it in and that's you. Any frequencies coming in then below the threshold of 100 Hertz get cut, and it just keeps it nice and clear and eliminates any muddiness from the signal. So that's gain indicator, low cut filter, and then we're on to the auxiliary sends, which are these 4, 2, 3, 4, 2 red, 2 yellow auxiliary sends. Now I'm going to split them up and deal with the red ones first, and then the yellow ones separately, because they do actually 2 different things. What these do to send a portion of the signal coming in decided by you by adjusting that. So that's auxiliary 1, that's auxiliary 2. So that's got 2 auxiliary sends that you can send to a variety of locations outside the desk. But it allows you to adjust how much of the signal is going to that send and how much is going to that send. So if this is your voice, your vocal, your main lead vocal channel, you might want to turn that up to there to send a lot of it out to auxiliary 1, turn it down to there to send it out to auxiliary 2. Well, what does that mean in the real world? The way you would typically use these is for your monitor mix, your on-stage monitor mix. So those wedge-shaped speakers that sit at the bottom of the stage in front of the musicians, pointing back at them to allow them to hear what it is they're singing and playing. That's mixed on here. So you might want 2 different monitor mixes. You might want the drummer's monitor mix, so he's got a speaker next to him at the drum kit, and he might want to hear predominantly bass and vocals. So wherever your bass and vocals are coming in, whichever channel it's coming in, you would turn those up and turn the guitar ones down a bit on auxiliary 2. On auxiliary 1, it might be the vocals and the guitarist, the front monitors on the front of the stage, and they might want to hear more vocal and more guitar and less bass and drums. So you can adjust those to feed that auxiliary 1 mix, and then send that mix via the auxiliary send jacks up here, which I'll talk about later, to 2 different monitoring locations. So a good example would be a drum monitor and the front monitors for the lead vocalist and guitarist to hear. This particular desk has a button here which says on it pre-fader. If you're using, the normal rule of thumb when using auxiliary sends is you want to send the signal pre-fader, and what that means is send it out of the desk before it gets to here and this fader level, because basically when you're messing about with all these sliders, you don't want that to interfere with all the levels for your monitor mix. You want to do your monitor mix levels with these red dials here. So you want to take the signal out to the monitors before it gets to the fader, pre-fader. So on this desk you can choose pre or post fader. So for monitor mixes you would engage the pre-fader button, and that then sends the signal out before it gets to the fader, and it's then unaffected by what you do with these levels down here. It's only affected by these 2 auxiliary send dials here. The yellow auxiliary sends are essentially the same as the red ones. The main difference being they are always post fader. So there's no selection switch on these. The signal always leaves the desk after the fader. So the signal leaving the desk will be affected by how much the white fader at the bottom of the channel strip is moved. And why you would want to use those typically, again, and there are exceptions to these rules if you like, but again another rule of thumb, typically you would use these for external effects. So you might want to send the signal for the channel strip out to some kind of effects unit, a chorus, delay, I don't know, reverb unit, whatever it might be. And you want the signal and the amount of reverb and everything else that the signal is affected by the outboard effects processor to be adjusted in proportion to the level of the signal on the channel strip. So you would want that post fader. So again, without getting into all the technical side of it and the ins and outs, if you just remember, normally for most applications, auxiliary sends pre-fader are for monitor mixes. This is in a live application, not a studio application, which might be different. Post-fade auxiliaries are normally reserved for effects units. Now there are 2 post-fade auxiliaries for effects, EFX1, which actually says on it in brackets external, and EFX2, which says in brackets internal. What that one does is it sends a portion of the signal decided by you by turning this dial to the internal effects processor, which has reverb and delay and chorus and flanger and all these nice things built in, and you can adjust how much of the signal for this channel goes to the internal effects unit. This also drives a second external effects jack, so you can send the signal on EFX2 to both an external processor and the internal processor at the same time. So these are essentially your effects sends, and they're post fader. Okay, You then come down to the EQ section, which is between my two fingers there, the blue knobs and the white knobs. And if you think of these as your tone controls for the channel, so you've got high frequency, mid frequency with a sweepable selector for the mid, I'll explain in a moment, and your bass frequencies or your low end. Excuse me, what these will also do is assist in eliminating feedback at certain frequencies, as will the 9-band graphic EQ over here. So if you get an awful feedback, you can play with these to try and focus and eliminate which frequency it is that's giving you the feedback and cut it ever so slightly to try and eliminate that feedback. Now again, in layman's terms and very, very simple, these controls are very sensitive. You don't have to move them much to get an effect. And the human ear is a lot more attuned to a boost in any of those frequencies than it is to a cut. So you can get away with cutting things which will improve the sound, but the human ear won't necessarily think that that's an artificial or a harsh sound. Whereas if you try and boost these, particularly if you do it too much, it really does interfere with the sound, the quality of the sound, how natural it is. So again, the rule of thumb, according to the books I've been reading anyway, is wherever possible, boost rather than cut, and use these very sparingly. Okay. The high end on this desk attacks the 12 kilohertz frequency, so 12,000 hertz. This will give a cut or a boost of 15 decibels, minus 15 to plus 15 decibels at 12 kilohertz. So that frequency, 12K, will be boosted or cut depending on which way you turn this, and the center position is unaffected, or often referred to as flat, no change. Same with the mids. The difference with the mids is, whereas this one is a fixed frequency control, it only adjusts the 12 kilohertz frequency. This mid control here with the white one, you can actually target whichever frequency you want, and this goes from 100 hertz to 8 kilohertz. So anywhere in that range, which is quite a wide range, you set that to the frequency that you want to cut or boost, and then you cut or boost with this one here. So it allows a lot of fine tuning and focusing on the exact frequency that it is you're after. So that's the mids section, and then the bass, the bottom and the low end, is the 80 hertz. That's a fixed band, the same as the top. 80 hertz frequency, again, cut or boost by 15 decibels. Center position is flat or unchanged. So that's the EQ section for that channel. And then finally here on the knobs anyway, you have the pan control, which is essentially your left, pan the signal to the left speaker or to the right speaker. It's a little bit more than just a standard balance control, because you can also use it for routing the signal through the desk in conjunction with some of these switches and buttons. But I'll try and explain that as best I can shortly. On each channel strip you have a mute. You have a mute button. Press that in, it mutes the channel, goes without saying. All the other channels are unaffected, just the one that you press the mute on is muted. And then on this particular desk, and this is where the desks are going to differ essentially, is you have these what are called routing buttons here. So this is where you tell the desk where you want to send this signal. Hey! This is your lead vocal. Where do you want it to go? And you can assign it to, this desk has 4 subgroups here, and then the main stereo mix. You can send this channel to subgroups 1 and 2, or you can send it to subgroups 3 and 4, or you can send it to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, all of the 4 subgroups. Okay. Now, again, without getting into the ins and outs, because it really is beyond the scope of this YouTube video, a good example of where you might want to use that is if you can imagine, if you've a fully mic'd drum kit, that's an awful lot of mics. Potentially you have a kick, a snare, toms, cymbals, ambience mics. You've an awful lot of mics, and it could take up like half a dozen channels. Well, once you've got these faders set for the drum kit, all the relative levels, so the snare slightly louder than the bass, the cymbals up a little bit more, whatever it is you want, whatever way you want to set your drum kit up on here. If you then route that to the 1 and 2 subgroup, brings you over to these faders here. You can then adjust the overall volume of the drum kit, louder or quieter, the whole kit, just with 2 faders, and leave the relative levels, so the snare relative to the bass, relative to the cymbals, relative to the toms, leave those unchanged. Example, and there's lots of flexibility here, you can do it in any number of different ways, but another example with this particular desk is you can assign that channel number 6 to subgroup 1, 2. And on this particular desk, what you then have over here is assign buttons on the subgroups as well, left and right, left and right. So here, on this particular desk, what you need to do actually is assign every channel that you want to feed the main mix to subgroup 1 and 2, and then click left and right. So subgroup is your stereo left, and subgroup 1 is your stereo left, subgroup 2 is your stereo right, and they then feed the main mix. Now this is getting very complicated, so I'm not going to go into that. Not all desks are the same when it comes to that, but a lot of desks do have subgroups, and as I said, that's one of the possible uses for a subgroup configuration is your drum kit. Another example would be all your backing vocals. So you could have 3 different backing vocalists, one with a very loud voice, so you want to bring them down a bit, one with a quieter voice, you want to bring them up a little bit, one with a medium voice there. So they're your backing vocalists. Feed them all to subgroups 1 and 2, sorry, that one as well. And then you're adjusting over here, just with these 2 sliders, the entire volume of your backing singers, whilst leaving the relative levels of those singers unchanged. So they're still going to be quieter and louder in relation to one another, but the overall volume level of the backing singers is controlled by just 2 faders over here, which then feed the main mix, which is what the audience hear, obviously. So that's these assign or routing buttons, as they're sometimes called here on the channel strip. I've already mentioned the faders. These faders are 60mm travel, which is the height of them. More professional faders on larger desks would be 100mm travel, so you've got a longer throw with a fader, but a lot of compact live desks, 60mm is quite common for the faders. I'm really not going to get into this in any great detail because I only just understand it myself, but you need to look up, if you really want to know any more about this, you need to look up decibels and the way that they measure sound output and sound pressure levels and all that sort of type of thing. But if I can explain it very simply, most controls on this desk, so all the faders and a lot of these dials have the center position, well, on the knobs it's the center position, marked with a letter U, and on the faders the letter U is about 3/4 of the way up its travel. There's the top of the travel, and there's the U position there. Some desks show that as 0 decibels. The U stands for unity gain, and essentially what that means is that if all these controls are set at unity gain, then the signal will pass through the channel strip unchanged. It won't be boosted, it won't be cut, it will be at the level that it enters the desk. It will also leave the channel to feed the main mix. So unity gain is the sort of the neutral position. Now, because decibels and decibel measurements are logarithmic in nature and not linear, a very small boost in this makes a very big difference in the level or the volume of the signal. So what you would normally do when setting up a channel on this desk and on a lot of desks is you would feed the signal in, microphone, whatever it might be, let's say it's a microphone, okay? You would adjust your gain to the right level using the LED and possibly the metering section, which will come to give a bit more detail, which I'll come to in a moment. But you would do that with this fader set at unity unity level, unity decibel level, and you would also have your main mix set at unity level. Now, the desk is not an amplifier. In an unpowered desk anyway, the desk is not an amplifier. So if this isn't loud enough, then you use your amp to increase the volume of the front of house speakers. This just gives you fine tuning from the desk to boost that signal slightly and equally with the main mix. But this should not be thought of as an amp. Your amp is a separate component or part of your active speaker. So they come with a volume level on them you use that to amplify the signal. This just allows you to fine tune and make corrections here. And you can boost or cut or whatever it is you want to do. And if you want to do a fade out on the main mix, you can slowly bring this down and that will fade everything, okay, without you having to go back over to your amp all the time and fiddle about with that. So finally, and a button I didn't really understand what this did until I read a lot more detail about it. This solo PFL, on some desks it just appears as PFL, which stands for pre-fade listen. On other desks it's just called solo, and on this desk it's called both, solo, pre-fade listen, PFL. What that does is allow you to, first of all, listen to just that one channel, or two or three or four or however many of these you want to press. Listen to that, isolated from the rest of the mix and all the other inputs coming in your headphones or in your control room if you've got a, if you're in a studio. It's quite handy for auditioning channels, if you like, and seeing what the levels are like, what the EQ's like, and all that kind of thing there. And you can just concentrate on that one sound. And equally, if you're getting problems with the sound, like you're getting some feedback, it also allows you to go through them one by one and see which channel it is that's giving you the problems. What it also allows you to do is the minute you press that solo button, the output meters which are here, which are these two ladder meters showing all these LEDs where the level goes up and down. There's a 0 level here, and then you're getting into clipping at the very top here, the red and yellow section of the meters. It takes the channel signal and displays it just on the left meter here. So what it's essentially doing is replicating what that little yellow 0 level set LED does here, but in a lot more detail. So you can see exactly where on the scale the sound is sitting, and you can adjust the gain control until you get it in a range that you're comfortable with here on the ladder meter. So around the sort of 0, 2 or 4, +2 or +4 decibel level here. And then you disengage that and you're back to a full mix again. That's the first 8 channels on this desk to here. Are all identical. They all do exactly the same thing. Then you have these final 2 channels here. I'm just going to push those up so you can see which ones I'm talking about. They're known as channels 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, and really they're just 9 and 10 is one channel, 11 and 12 is another channel, and they're stereo channels. So they start at the top here with a left and a right input. If you just occupy one of those, it automatically selects a mono input, but if you use both, you get a stereo input. And this would typically be things like drum machines, keyboards, synthesizers, those kinds of things would come in on a stereo input to the desk. So that's these inputs here. Ignore this section at the top, that's something separate. Like the mic channels, they have a gain control, but there's no 0 level set LED, and there's no low cut filter, and they have a very simple EQ section. They've still got the auxiliary sends, pre-fader button, post-fade auxiliary sends for external effects. The equalizer section here, there's no selectable mid-range, it's just fixed at 400 Hertz, and then you're back to the pan, and all the rest is the same. The reason they're simpler, those channels, those 2 stereo channels, is because most of the devices that you'll be putting into these have a lot of control and different parameters built into the device. So with a keyboard, for example, there'll be lots of fiddling and adjustments you can do on the keyboard itself for EQ levels, cut and boost, and all this, that and the other, without the desk needing to do anything. So that's the reason these are a bit more simplified than the mono input channels. The manufacturers obviously think that you may need to do a lot more with a mono signal than you would with a stereo signal, because with the mono signal you don't have that outboard flexibility like you get with outboard devices here, drum machines, synthesizers, all that kind of thing. So they're the same. I'm not going to go through all of those again. They're your 2 stereo channels. So just to recap, despite the fact this desk is called a 12 channel desk, it actually has 8 mono channels and 2 stereo channels, but the 2 stereo channels count as 4 channels, left right, okay? So it's called a 12 channel desk, and you'll find that a lot with these desks. That's the way they all refer to them, 12 channel desks. If you want my advice, you would pick your desk based on the number of microphones you think you're going to want to use, and then you always get a couple of stereo channels, invariably anyway, 2 or 3. But when I picked this desk, I was counting up right: lead vocal, backing vocal, bass guitar, 2 lead guitars, and then the remaining 3 mono inputs then could be drum mics or an acoustic guitar, because we do some tracks with just an acoustic guitar. So this desk, for the time being at least, is going to have everything we need. Okay. Back up to the top of the desk here. So we've done all of this side of the desk. Now there's only a little bit left to do. You've got the 2 inputs here for channels 9 and 10, stereo inputs for channels 11 and 12. So ignore that. If you look up here, what you have, you have your EFX send and returns. So basically the send is where the signal leaves the desk, and the return is where it comes back in again. And they're directly related to the yellow EFX knobs. So you would, for EFX channel 1, you would plug a jack into there, go into your effects, your reverb unit or your delay unit or whatever it is, and then from that effect you'd normally have a stereo cable coming back to the return jacks. So there's the left and right returns for channel number 1, for not channel number 1, sorry, for EFX auxiliary send number 1 here, and that's adjusted by that yellow level there. So that adjusts how much you send out of the board on that particular channel. So that's all those 6 done at the top there. Moving over here, this is quite common on desks as well, these sort of RCA white and red inputs and outputs. On this desk they're called tape input, tape output. They're sometimes called different things, but essentially what this does is it takes a parallel feed of the main mix that is unaffected by the main mix fader, so you can fiddle about with that and it won't change the level of signal here. What you would use that for, the tape outs anyway, is to feed a recording device, so a mini disc player, your PC, your laptop, your Mac, whatever. If you've got a multi-track recorder or whatever, or a DAT, a machine, whatever it is, you would send to the tape output to stereo feed, leave the desk. So it takes the entire main mix, takes it away from the desk so you can record it on another device. And so the great thing about it is it's not affected by the main mix fader. So if you want to fade the mix out, or if you have to take a call halfway through a recording session, you can flick that down. It's not going to affect the feed to the recording device, which will just carry on recording quite happily. The tape input section here is where you would typically feed in your iPod or a CD player, or if you want to play some music before the gig or during the changeovers or whatever. If you want your computer sound card or the output from your recording device to be fed back into the desk so you can listen to it from the desk as well without having to undo and redo loads of different connections, you can put your tape input in there, and then your input then can be monitored from the front of house speakers if you make the right selections on here, or from your phones, your headphone jack. You can listen to it. This desk, quite nicely, has what's called down here a brake switch, and what that does is you press that, it mutes the entire desk, regardless of the levels. These could all be set like that. It just mutes the entire desk except for the tape, the tape input. And as I said, that is designed with live use in mind, this particular desk. So the nice thing about that is sort of music at the beginning of the gig or during the changeovers, you just press that one switch. You don't have to mess about with your levels, everything's muted except for the music that you're feeding in from your iPod. So that's another example of how you might use that. You use them in different ways, but that's probably the most common example. This desk has a utility out left and right feed, which again is another main mix send. You might send that to a control room, to the engineer's room, to another room in the studio. If this is being used in a church, you could send that utility out to the creche or the chapel to the side of the main church. So you've got a feed of the main mix going into another room. That's what that does. And the auxiliary sends, that's where well, again, you could use that in a number of different ways, but we're going to use it more commonly used for the monitor sends. So auxiliary 1 goes out to your monitor, auxiliary 2 could go out to a second monitor, and you adjust those with these red dials, as I've already explained at the beginning. So those are your auxiliary sends 1 and 2. Over here you've got your main outs, which are balanced XLRs to your main speakers or to the amps driving your speakers. That's where they go. This desk also has a dedicated sub out, which is not available on all desks, but this one has a dedicated main out for a subwoofer. So if you're using a sub for the bass frequencies, you can plug that in there, a powered sub, and as Mackie say, the noise police will be right over. So they're your main outs, but you've also got an option if you don't want to use these XLR types connections. You have 1/4 inch connections main out here, using standard 1/4 inch jacks to feed your amp or your speakers left and right. So they're your main outs. So you'd either use those two or these two, not both together. Your main inserts work exactly the same as the inserts on the channel strips, except they apply the effect that you're sending and returning to the entire mix. So whereas these inserts here just affect that one channel, the main inserts affect the entire mix. So you might send that out to a big fancy equalizer that would be better probably than the 9-band. You could get a 30-band stereo EQ to EQ the entire main mix, and that's where you would they're both send and return, each jack that's left and right, and as I said earlier, you use those Y cables, and the jack works as both a send and a return in the one jack. I think I was talking about the last time was the sub outs, which are these 4 output jacks here in this section of the outputs, the output section of the mixer, and you can use them for a number of things. You can use them to send 4 independent signals out to 4 different locations. You can use them to send 4 signals into one location. If that were, for example, a multi-track recorder, you could send 4 tracks out at the same time into 4 different inputs on your multi-track recorder and record in batches of 4 tracks at a time. You can send them out to all manner of other things. So that's the sub outs. Over here on this section of this particular mixer, you have a BNC lamp connection. I'll take that headphone thing out. You have a BNC, which is a fairly standard connection for a gooseneck lamp to light up the mixer. Takes power from the mixer, but it will light up the mixer, obviously, if you're mixing at the back of a dark and dingy club. You have here the masters for your sends. So you've got master send, master level for auxiliary send number 1 and auxiliary send number 2, so that will adjust your overall monitor mix on monitor number 1 and monitor number 2 if that's what you're using them for. And here your master for your external effects send. So you set the relative levels, each channel relative to one another here with these ones, and then the master, the overall send level to the external effects unit with this dial here. This has a 9-band graphic EQ, graphic meaning that when you adjust all these, you can see a curve shape or whatever, you know, you can see that sort of swiggle. In the center position there's a little detent, so they click into place. That's flat, that's EQ's flat. This is the EQ for the entire desk, for the overall main mix. So it's a little bit more detailed than the separate channel EQs, and a lot more choice on frequency ranges that you can either cut or boost, but the level of that cut or boost is exactly the same as here. It's plus 15 boost to a minus 15 decibel cut on each of these 9 frequency bands. So here at the lower end you have the sub 1K frequencies, so that you particularly these first two or three, your bass frequencies, and then you get further and higher up the frequency range till you get to the very top end or trebly frequencies, up at 16k, 16,000 hertz, 16 kilohertz, those sorts of frequencies. So you can make fine tunings to the overall sound adjustment with the 9-band EQ. You can also use that to assist in feedback elimination. So if you are getting a feedback problem with the monitors normally, or anything else you're using for that matter, then you can use the EQ section to try and eliminate or cut just at the frequency that's causing the feedback. So if you identify it's around here that the problem is, you can cut that just a little bit, and hopefully that will help and take out the feedback that you're experiencing at that frequency level. Moving down the masters section here of the desk, here you have a button, phantom power switch, that provides global phantom power on this particular desk. So in other words, every single mic channel gets phantom power, 48 volt phantom power if you engage that switch. And you would need that if you were using high quality condenser mics rather than the dynamic style mic. That's a dynamic mic, that's an SM58, which is what I use, fairly standard, but they needs no power in order to operate, whereas the condenser mics, because of the different method of operation, they need power supplied to them at 48 volts, and normally that's supplied by the desk if it has the phantom power facility. Now again, something I learned, I was a bit nervous about until I knew more about it, but something I've learned now is that you can still use dynamic mics with the global phantom power switch switched on, engaged. You can still use them as long as whatever it is you're connecting to these sockets here is balanced. Then it won't be affected adversely by the phantom power. So you can use a mixture of dynamic and condenser mics on these inputs, engage the phantom power, and as long as your dynamic mic is plugging into the desk in a balanced connection, which most decent quality dynamic mics will, then they're not going to be harmed by the phantom power. It's only if it's connected via an unbalanced connection that you're going to have the problems. I'll leave the effects section here just for one moment and talk about this metering section here, and some of the master volume things or master level things for various features of the desk. So starting at the top here, you've got your overall return level for EFX1, the EFX1 send. If you remember, that's where we send little bits of each channel out of the desk via the master send here and through the effects processor, and then back into the desk, into the main mix via this effects return. So that affects the level of the return signal back into the desk from the external effects unit. Now the next dial down here is tape level, and that effectively adjusts the signal level from whatever you have here in the tape input section. Sorry, here, that's output. No, that is input, yeah, beg your pardon. The tape input. So if that's your intermission or your break music, then and you're playing that between bands or whatever it might be, you can adjust the volume of that, the level coming into the desk with that tape level dial there. You can, I think that gives you 20 decibels of extra gain, and it's connected here to this break switch, which essentially what that does, press that in, it mutes all the channels on the desk and just leaves the tape level active. So you can set your levels, engage the break switch, play your music, and you're not going to hear any of the other channels, just the tape, just the music that you're playing from your iPod or whatever it might be. Next one down is the phones level. Your headphones go in here, and you can use those for all sorts of things. You can be monitoring the main mix. You can use your headphones to solo the channels and just audition single channels at a time, or 3 together, or numbers 5 and 7, or whatever ones you want to listen to. You can adjust the headphone volume with this dial here, and then finally on this desk your utility out level. There's your left and right utility out. As I've already said, you can send those out to different rooms, and you can adjust their volume with this dial here, this utility out knob. Okay. Right, so I think, one final thing I missed up here on this desk. Yeah, well, it's linked in with this anyway, so I guess it's not so out of step. This particular desk has built-in effects, so a useful feature for me, because I didn't want, the main effect I'm going to be using is reverb on the vocals, and there's all sorts of different reverbs on this desk. I didn't want to have to carry around a separate reverb outboard effects processor and have to mess about patching it in here and all the rest of it, if I could get a desk with built-in effects. So this has built-in effects. Those effects are digital and they're 32-bit, which I'm led to believe, I don't know much about that, but I'm led to believe that it's better quality than a 24 or 16-bit digital processor. No doubt it's processing more bits per whatever, so yeah, I think a better quality. As I said, I'm not very up on this kind of thing, you can probably tell. All I know is this is where we add some nice internal effects to the mix. In other words, it's not provided by way of an outboard effects processor, it's built into the desk here. So we can send different channels via the EFX2 send into that in that direction, and then this master level here sets the master level at which all of these channels enter the effects processor unit here. We have a clip LED light to say when it's overloading or at risk of overloading the processor, so we can turn that down a little bit if that's starting to light. The next knob along is on this desk, and this is where desks will probably differ, I suppose, is these controls here. On this particular desk, that white knob there controls how much of the effects end up in the main mix, and it says on it to main mix, so you can adjust how much of the wet affected signal goes into the main mix, and turn it down a bit if you want more of the dry unaffected signal going into the main mix. And then these two here are just effects sends to your auxiliary channels, so if you're using those as monitors, as I will be all the time pretty much, that allows you to send some of the affected signal out to the monitors, so you're hearing back on stage a signal with a bit of reverb on, or whatever effect it is that you've applied here. That's your effect selector dial, so there's all sorts of effects here. These are all your sort of reverb effects down this side. Over this side you've got 4 delays, a chorus, a flanger, a phaser and spring reverb effect, and you choose it with this dial here, whichever one you want, and then here and here you can set parameters for those effects. So you can, if for example if you've got a reverb effect selected, you can adjust here the timing of that reverb, so the echo or the shape of the reverb, if you were to draw it as a graph, the tail would be longer, or it's got a shorter attack time, and then here you can set the depth or the damping of the chorus, the reverb, whatever it is. So in other words, these two knobs adjust how pronounced the effect is, or they can tone it down a little bit if it's too much. These two buttons here, the first one says wide, click that in, and on certain stereo effects, it doesn't affect the mono effects, but on the stereo effects it gives an impression of a wider stereo image on the speakers, and can add quite a nice depth to the effect sound. And then here finally is the bypass switch with a little LED above it. Click that in, the effects processor unit is bypassed by all the signals and disengaged. So that's that. This fader here, on some desks you have two, a left and a right for stereo. On others they're brought in together and just put into one fader to make it easier to operate, so you're not messing about with two. And that obviously controls the main mix level. Again, when you're setting up your levels, you would normally have that up near unity gain, just in about that position there. You'd set the overall volume with your amplifier or your powered speakers, and then you could use this then to boost that. You're getting then another 10 decibels of boost, which I think equates to a doubling in sound. Again, you'll have to look that up because I'm not that up on Decibels and all that malarkey, but you can boost that then, boost the main mix level with that fader, or indeed, if you wish, drop it down a bit, or even slowly fade it out to nothing there. Okay, so that's, I think, the desk in its entirety. As I said, a lot of desks share a lot of features. Certainly on this side of the desk, a lot of features common to a lot of different desks, be they powered or unpowered. They're all very similar. The main use for this particular desk is A, for live use with the band, and B, for recording. And it would be my intention in due course to buy a digital multi-track recorder or an audio interface for the Mac to be able to go from the desk, probably by way of the inserts. If you click, as I think I said earlier on, if you click a jack halfway into that to the first click, it acts as a direct out for the channel rather than just an insert. So you can send any of these channels directly out of the desk into a recording interface or a multi-track recorder. So I'll probably use it for a bit of recording, or we can send the whole mix, the entire mix, out of the desk via the left and right tape output jacks here, and then just record the entire mix. But if we want to record it as separate channels, then we would use probably be using these direct outs here. A nice feature to have. The desk, it's got rubber sides on it. They come off and allow you to fit rack ears to the desk. So if you were of a mind, you could buy a rack for the desk, a standard 19-inch rack. I'm not sure how many rack spaces it takes up. I'm not intending to do that, but you can do that. You can remove these, get rack ears, and fit it on top of a rack, and then have all your outboard effects and amps and stuff in the spaces underneath. If you wish to have it all in one rack, you could do it that way. And other than that, I don't think there's much to say, much else to say. I'm looking forward to using it. I'm looking forward to playing with it a lot between now and when I first have to use it in a live gig environment, so I can get to know it, learn the desk a bit more, and get comfortable with where all the buttons and knobs are and what does what, and the way it all works together. I'll probably put some videos up in due course of the desk in use. We're demoing a few songs tomorrow night, hopefully, so we may even get to use it then. But at the minute, I'm a bit limited because I don't have any speakers for it. So I'm using the headphones, or else I'd play you something through it. But we're building this PA system a bit at a time, and this really is the first part done. So again, YouTube, hope you found that useful. If, like me, the look of a mixing desk was causing you some consternation and concern, it was all a bit bewildering, I hope that's demystified it a little bit for you. As I said at the beginning, I'm not a sound professional. I'm just a guy in a band who happens to work the desk. I'm not. I don't know all the ins and outs. Far from it. But if you do have any questions that I'm able to answer, leave them in the comments section, and I really will do my best, as always, to try and answer the question or point you in the right direction. There's some great videos on YouTube on as music production, sound mixing, live mixing, desks, all that kind of stuff. So you can you have a lot there to look at. This really was just aimed at a basic newbie's guide to what is a mixing desk and what on earth do all those knobs do. Alright, YouTube, I'm going to shut up talking now, and wish you all the best, and hope to see you again soon. If you like what you saw, don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, check our band out, Grounds for Divorce, on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Grounds for Divorce band. And also check out some of our YouTube videos of our live gigs on this channel. There's loads of them. So, and again, I look forward to reading your comments on that if you like it, or even if you don't like it. Yeah, all good. Alright, peace out, take it easy.